Thank you so very much for that. Now we can get started without further delay. Today's conference, as you all know, is another special edition with a special guest who, for the next 2 hours, will engage Nigerians across the globe on a special theme chosen for the day, which is From Promise to Performance, the leadership imperative for delivering the renewed hope agenda. My co-hosts for today are the usual co-hosts, starting from Honorable Jacob Ogusheye, Hajia Rekia Bello Abakar, Ambassador Kairat Animasha Wajiboye, Honorable Debe Ukwe, Alhaja Aula Sule, Honorable Sheung Bayewu, and Barrister Tosin Olayinka. They will be assisting me in moderating today's conference to ensure a smooth and uninterrupted deliberation. This conference, as we all know, is streaming live across social media and especially on Bent TV UK, courtesy of the CEO of the first Nigerian African digital TV channel headed by Alastair Shode, and the Diaspora TV in Switzerland, led by its CEO as well, Honorable Mark Bamidele. Many thanks, sirs, for your support and assistance always. And, just looking through the conference room today, I can see, as usual, we have new faces today, as we always do every Saturday, as well as the old faces and some of our leaders from across the globe. Towards the end of this conference, I will be acknowledging their presence. In the meantime, on behalf of the team behind the Renewed Hope Global, I welcome you all to this session. On today's conference, we have in our midst an expert on who is a pharmacist, a scholar, and a public health epidemiologist. He is Dr. Chukwumezie Okolo. He's going to be our special guest for today. So, and distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to announce that our special guest for today has joined the conference. So, to set the ball rolling for this virtual conference, please permit me to read out the profile of our special guest, Dr. Chukwumezie Okolo. Dr. Chukwumezie Okolo is a Nigerian-American leadership scholar, a pharmacist, and public health epidemiologist with over 2 decades of experience across healthcare systems, policy environments, and organizational leadership in the United States and the United Kingdom. He holds a PhD in leadership studies from Johnson University, USA, with additional degrees in international health and public health epidemiology, and has worked at the intersection of practice, policy, and strategy, from managing high-volume healthcare operations in Texas to contributing to health system strengthening and leadership development initiatives across the continent. Dr. Okolo is the president, Right Place Center for Leadership and Strategy, where his work focuses on policy, strategy, critical thinking, governance, and institutional performance. His approach to leadership is grounded in a central premise, that the effectiveness of institutions is shaped not only by intent or effort, but by the quality of thinking, clarity of purpose, and discipline of execution that leaders bring to complex problems. Having returned recently to Nigeria after extensive international experience, he is committed to contributing to national development through evidence-based insights, honest engagement, and a focus on practical transformation, leveraging technology and experience gathered over 2 decades. Dr. Okolo brings a perspective that is analytical, non-partisan, and grounded in both global exposure and local relevance, engaging leadership not through rhetoric, but through clarity, structure, and strategic insight. Today, you will speak on From Promise to Performance, the leadership imperative for delivering the Renewed Hope agenda. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Dr. Chukwumezie Okolo to the Renewed Hope Global Virtual Town Hall Conference. Once again, our main topic for today is From Promise to performance, the leadership imperative for delivering the renewed hope agenda. Usually at this juncture, I usually first shoot the first salvo of questions to our special guests. But my understanding is that our special guest be another scholar, like we've had in the last couple of weeks, intends again to take us back to school today. So he's prepared a PowerPoint presentation, which I believe is going to wow everybody across the world. So I'm going to yield the floor to you now, sir. You have the floor, sir. Thank you very much. You can unmute now. You can unmute yourself. Okay, yeah.
Thank you, Ambassador, for that warm introduction and for the invitation. Let me see. I'm probably going to share from. Hold on one second. So can I? Okay. So. All right. Can you hear me, everybody?
Yes, loud and clear, sir.
Thank you. Again, thank you very much for this opportunity to be invited to the Renewed Hope Global Town Hall. And I want to thank all Nigerians for joining from around the world to this very important discourse. I'm going to promise that I will try to be as quick as possible so we can engage. Today, we are not here to just listen to me. I would invite us to think, to interrogate, and more importantly, to take responsibility. Because Nigeria, our country, is not at one of those routine moments. If anything, we are at a defining moment, a moment where expectations are high, where pressure is real, and where leadership must now move beyond articulation into delivery. Our theme, from promise to performance, is not just it is a diagnosis. Because when you study nations over time, you notice something very consistent. Countries do not fail because they lack ideas. If anything, they fail because they are unable to convert ideas into outcomes. They fail not at the level of vision, but at the level of execution. And that distinction is very important and critical because Nigeria does not lack vision. Nigeria does not also lack policy frameworks. She does not lack ambition either. What Nigeria has struggled with historically is actually the disciplined conversion of promise into measurable performance. So the question before us today is not a superficial one. It is, in fact, a structural question. What has been promised is the question that everybody is asking. The reality is that that's not even what we are worried about today. Today is going to be about what is being delivered, what is being experienced, and what must change for delivery to become consistent. And that question is not for government alone. It is for leadership across all levels, for institutions, for citizens, and for everyone that has a stake in the country. Because if governance is a system, and it is, of course, then performance is also a collective output, not an individual effort. So as we proceed, I want us to approach this conversation with intellectual honesty, not political bias, not emotional reaction, but analytical clarity. Because only then can we really answer the most important question: can Nigeria deliver on her promises And if yes, what exactly will it take? Next slide. Next slide. Are you on slideshow? Why is it not working? All right. Why this matters? Let us now move to a fundamental question. Why does this moment actually matter? And I want to answer that in a way that moves us beyond policy language into lived reality. Because governance is often discussed as if it only exists in abstraction, but the reality is it is not. It is not something that is lived in documents alone or frameworks or announcements. Governance is not an abstract. It is an experience. And that is very important for us to understand as we set out on this conversation tonight. Because governance is experienced in what people eat, and whether the food is becoming unaffordable in the market. It's experienced in their transportation, whether they can still get to work or whether they have to use a lot of their money to take care of transportation. It's experienced in safety, not in official briefings this time, but in whether people can actually move freely without fear. Governance is experienced in education, whether the families can sustain their children in school. It's experienced in their enterprise and their businesses, whether businesses are actually expanding, stagnating, or actually quietly shutting down. Now, if we situate Nigeria within this lived framework, we must now begin to confront something different. That Nigeria today is not operating in a low pressure environment. If anything, it could be described as a compressed pressure environment. Economic pressure is real, not just statistics. And the youth expectation is rising, not because the youth are impatient, so to speak, but because of exposure, because of comparisons, and because of aspirations. Global competition is intensifying. Whether Nigeria is stable or stabilizes or not, it doesn't matter. And citizen patience is also thinning, not because Nigerians are unwilling to endure, but because the cost of endurance is also rising. Now, let us introduce even a second layer to this analysis, the diaspora. For a long time, we treated our diaspora primarily as a source of remittances. But that is no longer sufficient, because the diaspora is now analytically engaged. Nigerians in diaspora are not just asking emotional questions about Nigeria. They are asking structured, strategic questions. And some of those could be like questions like, is Nigeria becoming predictable? Are policies stable enough to support long-term investment? And I get asked these questions every time. Is governance becoming credible? Is reform becoming consistent? And these are not small questions, because the answers of to these questions determine whether capital will flow or stay away, whether talent will return or stay abroad, and whether partnerships will expand or people are going to hesitate. So when we speak about this moment, we must be precise. This is not just a policy moment. It is a credibility moment. And credibility is very, very foundational to the conversation we are having, because when credibility is strong, reforms will be tolerated, sacrifices will be understood, and patience will be sustained. But when credibility weakens, now resistance will increase. People will be more skeptical. And even then, well-designed and well-intended reforms will struggle to gain acceptance. So the real issue here is not just whether reforms are happening. The real issue is whether those reforms are credible, whether they are coherent, and whether they are leading to outcomes that people can feel. And that is why this moment is important. That is why it matters. Not because of announcement, not because of policies, not because of any relationships, but because people are interested in what is being done, what is being experienced, and what is being believed. And until those three align properly, delivery will always remain under question. Next slide. All right, so having established why this moment is important, the next question is straightforward for me. What exactly has been promised? We are looking at the promise of renewed hope. Because before we evaluate performance, we must first understand the architecture of expectation. The renewed hope agenda at its core represents a national aspiration towards a reset and renewal. I want us to mark that word national aspiration because it's important. Because it seeks to reposition Nigeria along several critical dimensions. First, economic stabilization and recovery, because it wants to address fiscal distortions, restoring our macroeconomic balance, and improving the investment confidence in Nigeria. Second, job creation and economic expansion, particularly through support for enterprise, industrial activities, and youth engagement. Number three, security improvement, reducing threats to life and property and restoring confidence across communities. Number four, institutional reform, by strengthening governance systems, improving efficiency, and enhancing accountability. Number five, inclusive prosperity, ensuring that that growth, when it occurs, is not narrowly concentrated, but broadly experienced. Now, when you examine these pillars, it becomes clear that this is not a narrow policy agenda. It is, in fact, a comprehensive national repositioning effort, a giant one at that. And that is very important because it tells us that the ambition is not incremental. The ambition is structural. But this is where analytical clarity becomes very necessary. We must understand the difference between policy intention and policy experience. Governments articulate intention, but citizens experience outcomes. And the distance between those two is where perception is formed. So I can put it very clear like this. A government may announce economic reform, but the citizens experience food prices. A government may announce fiscal correction, but the citizen experiences transport costs. Government may articulate growth strategy, but the citizen experiences employment opportunities or the absence or the lack thereof. So the real test of any agenda is not in its design, it is its translation. How effectively does intention become experience? Now, this creates even yet a second layer of tension, expectations. Because when an agenda is framed around renewal, like the renewed hope agenda, it naturally elevates expectations. Citizens begin to anticipate change. They begin to look for signals, and of course, they begin to ask questions. When will things improve? How will improvement be felt? And who will benefit first? And those kind of questions. And they are legitimate questions. And if those expectations are not matched with visible outcomes within a reasonable time frame, then a gap will begin to emerge. And that gap is not just economic gap. It is psychological, it is political. Because when expectation rises faster than outcomes, confidence will begin to erode. So the challenge before leadership is not just to design a strong agenda like the renewed hope agenda, but to manage three things simultaneously. The substance of reform is very important. Has to manage the substance of reform, the experience of citizens, and the expectations that shape perception. And that is not a trivial task either, because these three do not always move at the same speed. And where they diverge, tension could emerge. So as we proceed, we must evaluate the renewed hope agenda not just as a set of promises, but as a system that must convert and it must convert ambition into execution, must convert execution into outcomes, and then, of course, outcomes into public confidence. Next slide. Let's look at the historical perspective so we can put this in context and then have a better understanding. To convert promise into performance is difficult, but we must step back because the present moment does not exist in isolation. It is part of a pattern, and that pattern has shaped Nigeria's governance trajectory over time. Nigeria began with promise, very significant promise. We have a strong resource base, a large and dynamic population, strategic geographic positioning. We have early institutional structures that, at least in theory, could support development. But over time, something began to emerge, not as a single failure, but as a recurring pattern. A pattern of strong ideas, but weak execution. Pattern of policy announcement and limited continuity. Reform intentions, incomplete institutionalization. And so over time, this pattern became normalized. Now it is important for us to be very precise here. This is not primarily a story of individuals. It is the story of a system, or of systems. Because when the same outcomes repeat across different administrations, across different personalities, across different political contexts, we are no longer dealing with isolated leadership failures. We are now dealing with structural conditions. So let us examine those conditions a little more closely first. Policy discontinuity. Each administration introduces new priorities, often without fully consolidating the previous ones. And this leads to fragmentation. Then, weak institutional memory. Sometimes systems do not retain learning effectively because of weak institutional memory. So mistakes are repeated over time. Number three, implementation gaps. Policies are designed, but execution lacks discipline, coordination, and follow-through. Number four will be limited accountability structures. Because when performance is not consistently tied to measurable outcomes, now even the accountability structures are weakened. Now, when these conditions combine, something now predictable happens. A country develops what I could then call execution deficit, where ideas are abundant, but plans are available, but outcomes remain inconsistent. And this seems to have been our story. And this deficit is not immediately visible to in policy discussion rooms or classrooms. It becomes visible in results. Now we can bring it now back to the present, the renewed hope agenda. Because when you look at it from this existing structure, it is not operating on a blank slate. It's operating within a system that has historically struggled with continuity, coordination, and disciplined execution. So the challenge before us, or before the current leadership, is not just to introduce reform, but also to break a pattern. And breaking a pattern is fundamentally different from just launching a policy. It requires institutional strengthening or re-strengthening, consistency over time, and deliberate correction of systemic weaknesses. Because if the structures remain unchanged, then even the well-designed reform will produce familiar results and outcomes. So the key insight here is that Nigeria's challenges are not the absence of ideas. In fact, they are the presence of a persistent execution gap rooted in structural conditions. And unless those conditions are addressed, the gap between promise and performance will continue to reappear. Next slide. Let me introduce. We have described the problem, but description alone is not sufficient. So to move us from observation to understanding of what is going on, we need some frameworks. And I'm going to look at it through some lenses that I caption as theories. These lenses will allow us to explain not just what is happening, but why it is happening. And I will briefly introduce 4 such lenses today, not as abstract theories, but as practical tools for understanding governance. First, the baton stewardship theory. And that theory talks about governance as a relay. No administration starts from zero. Every administration, as a matter of fact, inherits a system, partially functional, partially distorted, and oftentimes incomplete, assets, liabilities. That system includes policies already in place, institutional strengths and weaknesses, economic conditions, and public expectations. So leadership is not created in the pure sense. It is continuation. And this has an important implication, because leadership must be judged not only by what it proposes, but by what it improves relative to what it inherited. The second theory is the delayed dividend theory. Structural reforms, especially economic reforms, rarely produce immediate benefits. In fact, they often produce the opposite. They produce disruption first, then stabilization later. Now, this creates a critical tension because citizens experience the present, but reforms promise the future. And between present pain and future gain lies a gap. That gap is where legitimacy is tested. Because if citizens cannot see or feel progress within a reasonable time frame, support for reform weakens. So reform is not just a technical exercise. It is also a question of timing, sequencing, and communication. The third theory is the institutional dependence theory. This is perhaps the most critical lens for understanding Nigeria. Leadership does not operate in isolation. It operates through institutions. And the effectiveness of leadership depends heavily on whether those institutions can function independently. Now, what does independence mean in practical terms? It means our institutions can generate accurate information, provide honest feedback, enforce accountability, and correct deviations. But when institutions become dependent, when they rely excessively on leadership for direction, for validation, for protection, then something happens. Information could become filtered. Accountability could become selective. And correction could become slow. And the system begins to lose its ability to self-correct. So even when good policies are introduced, execution becomes inconsistent. And this leads to a very important conclusion. The real constraint is not policy design, it is state capacity. And then the fourth theory is the triadic leadership theory. Leadership itself must be understood as a balance, because effective leadership requires equilibrium across 3 forces: vision, duty, and empathy. Vision is the ability to define direction, duty, the discipline to enforce execution, and empathy, the capacity to sustain legitimacy through compassionate inclusivity. Now, if vision dominates without discipline, we get instability. If discipline dominates without empathy, we get resistance. And if empathy dominates without direction, we get a drift. So leadership effectiveness is not about strength in one dimension. It is about balance across all 3. Now let's integrate them. When we bring all these 4 lenses together, something becomes very clear. Nigeria's challenge is not a single variable problem. It is an interaction problem. The interaction between inherited structural conditions, reform timing and sequencing, institutional strength and weaknesses, and leadership balance. And we use those theories to address those four. And that interaction determines outcomes, not intentions, outcomes. So going forward, everything we discuss, progress, gaps, imperatives, must be interpreted through these lenses, because without them, we risk misdiagnosis. And that could be a problem also. And when diagnosis is wrong, solution itself will be ineffective. Next slide. The baton stewardship theory. Let us begin with that first lens. At its core, this theory asks us to see governance not as a series of isolated administrations, but as a continuous relay. Each administration receives a baton, and that baton is not empty. It's not empty. It carries with it accumulated progress over time, unresolved challenges, structural strengths, structural weaknesses, and all these stories from previous administrations. Now, this perspective is important because it changes how we interpret leadership. It reminds us that no government begins from a neutral starting point. Every government inherits a system that has already been shaped, sometimes positively, sometimes negatively, by previous decisions made by previous administrations. So leadership is not operating in a vacuum. It is operating within a trajectory. Now, let's translate that into the Nigerian context. Over time, Nigeria has accumulated a number of structural conditions. Some of these conditions have supported growth, but many have introduced distortions. So when a new administration assumes office, it does not simply design policy from a clean slate. It must first navigate what it has inherited. And this has two important implications. First is explanatory, some explanatory implications. It helps us to now understand why certain decisions appear abrupt or difficult, because they are often responses to accumulated pressures that can no longer be postponed. The second implication is evaluative. It clarifies how we access leadership, because if governance is relay, then leadership must be judged not only by what it proposes, but by what it improves relative to what it inherited. Now, it is important to maintain balance here. Inheritance itself explains context, which is important, but it does not eliminate responsibility. And that decision matters, because while no administration chooses its starting point, every administration is responsible for its trajectory. So the question is not whether challenges were inherited. That is a given. The real question is, how effectively are those inherited challenges being transformed into improved outcomes? Because that is where leadership is ultimately tested. And that is where the conversation must remain focused. Next slide. So let's look at the renewed hope through the baton lens. Having established that governance is a relay, the next step is to examine the specific baton that current leadership inherited. Because theory alone becomes useful when it applies in context. And the context now is within the Nigerian context. When we look at Nigeria at the point of transition, several structural realities were already in place. Those were not new developments, they were cumulative conditions. And let me highlight a few of them. One, the fuel subsidy distortion. Over time, the subsidy regime evolved from a temporary intervention into a structural body. It consumed significant fiscal resources, introduced inefficiencies, and created opportunities for rent seeking. But more importantly, it distorted price signals across the economy. Number two, foreign exchange instability. The existence of multiple exchange rates and within their windows created uncertainty. It also complicated planning for businesses and affected investor confidence. And it also introduced inefficiencies into trade and capital flows. Number three, the fiscal pressure. Revenue generation struggled to keep pace with expenditure demands. Debt servicing of obligations increased, and the fiscal space for development and developmental spending became increasingly constrained. Number four, security challenges. Insecurity in its various forms affected not only safety but also economic activities. Our agricultural practices were disrupted, supply chains were affected, investor confidence weakened in certain regions. Now it is important for us to understand that these are not isolated issues. They are interconnected. And how interconnected? Fuel pricing affects transport, transport affects food costs, security affects production, production affects inflation. So what leadership inherited was not a set of independent problems. It was a system of interlinked constraints. And when constraints are interlinked, then solution cannot be superficial. There must be structural too. Now this brings us to an important clarification. Recognizing inheritance is not about shifting responsibility. It's about understanding context. Because without context, decisions appear arbitrary. With context, decisions become explainable. But again, we must maintain balance. Context explains difficulty. It does not excuse outcomes. So while leadership inherited constraints, it also is responsible for how those constraints are addressed, how reforms are sequenced, and how outcomes are delivered. So the key question now becomes, given what was inherited, how effectively are reforms being designed and implemented to transform those conditions? Because that is where performance will now ultimately be judged. Next slide. The delayed dividend theory. Now, having examined what was inherited, we now turn to a critical question. Why do reforms often feel difficult, especially in the short term? To answer this, we turn to what I call the delayed dividend theory. At its core, this theory recognizes a fundamental reality of structural reform. Reforms do not produce benefits immediately. In fact, in many cases, they produce the opposite. They produce disruption first, and then stabilization later. That means the pains go before the gains. Now, why does this happen? Because many of the distortions that reforms are designed to correct have been built up over the years. And when those distortions are removed, the system must adjust. Let me make that concrete. When a subsidy is removed, prices adjust to reflect actual costs. When exchange rates are unified, market pressures become visible. When fiscal discipline is introduced, certain forms of spending are constrained. These adjustments are necessary for long-term stability. But in the short term, they create pressure. Now, this introduces a very important tension. Citizens live in the present. Reforms are designed for the future. So what we have is a time mismatch. Immediate experience versus delayed benefit. And this gap is not trivial because it is within this gap that perception is formed. Now, it is important to emphasize something here. When citizens express frustration, it is often misinterpreted. It is sometimes seen as resistance to reform, but in reality, it is something else. It is a response to lived experience. People are responding to higher food prices, increased transport costs, reduced purchasing power. These are real effects, and they must be acknowledged as such. But now this brings us to a critical insight. Reform success is not determined only by economic logic, and this is important. It's also determined by perceived fairness, timing, and visibility of relief. Because if citizens cannot see a pathway from sacrifice to improvement, then support for reform will weaken. So leadership must manage not just the policy, but the transition. And managing transition requires a couple of things. One, sequencing. And by sequencing, I mean ensuring that painful reforms are accompanied by some mitigating measures. Number two, communication. Explaining not just what is happening, but why and what to expect. And then number three, visible progress. Delivering tangible improvements within a time frame that sustains confidence. Because ultimately, reform is not just a technical process. It is a social contract. And that contract depends on trust. So the key takeaway here is this. Immediate difficulty does not mean reform is wrong, but it does mean that leadership must actively manage the transition so that the short-term pain does not undermine the long-term gain expected from the reform. Institutional, next slide, institutional dependence theory. Now we have established three important points. First, that governance is a relay. Second, that reforms often produce delayed benefits. And third, that citizens experience the immediate effect of those reforms. So the next question is a critical one. If reforms are necessary and if they are being implemented, why do outcomes still lag behind expectations? And to answer that, we must now look beyond policy. We must look at institutions. This is where the institutional dependence theory becomes essential. At its core, this theory makes a simple but powerful claim. The leadership effectiveness is not determined by leadership alone. It is determined by the strength and the independence of the institutions through which leadership operates. Now, let's try to unpack this. Institutions are machinery of governance. They are responsible for generating information, for implementing policy, for enforcing rules, and for monitoring outcomes, and in fact, for also correcting deviations. But for institutions to perform these functions effectively, they must possess certain degree of independence. Independence not in the political sense, but in the functional sense. They must be able to present accurate data, even when it is uncomfortable. They must be able to provide honest feedback, even when it is inconvenient. They must be able to enforce standards, even when it is difficult, and to correct errors, even when it is sensitive. Now, when institutions lack this functional independence, something subtle but deeply consequential begins to happen. First, information becomes filtered. Instead of reflecting reality, it begins to reflect what is acceptable. Accountability becomes selective. Performance is now being judged not strictly on outcomes, but on alignment. And then number three, correction slows down because problems persist longer than they should because the system cannot adjust quickly. Now, from the outside, the system may still appear active. It may still be sure that something is going on. Policies are announced, meetings are being held, reports are being generated, but outcomes lag behind. And this creates now a paradox, a system that is busy, but not necessarily effective. Let's connect this back to Nigeria. Nigeria does not lack policies. Nigeria does not lack plans. She does not lack reform intentions. What Nigeria has struggled with is something more specific, the ability of its institutions to consistently translate policy into outcomes. And this brings us to a critical conclusion in this section, that the real constraint is not policy decision, policy design or policy decision. It is state capacity. State capacity is what determines whether policies are implemented consistently, whether the results are being measured accurately, and whether adjustments are made on time. So when we observe a gap between promise and performance, we must be careful not to misdiagnose the problem. Because if we assume the problem is policy alone, then we'll continue to design more policies. But if the problem is institutional capacity, then better policy design will not be sufficient. What it will now require is system strengthening, because ultimately it is systems, not speeches, not policies that determine outcomes. And unless institutions can function with discipline, with independence, and with accountability, the gap between intention and result will continue to suffer. Next slide. All right. So we're looking at citizens, the reality of citizens. Having examined the structural and institutional dimensions of reform, it is important that we now return to the most immediate layer of governance, the citizen experience. So this is important because regardless of how well policies are designed or intended and how necessary reforms may be, governance is ultimately judged by how it is experienced, not in theory, in practice. Now, let us be clear about what that experience looks like today for many Nigerians. It is experienced in the market where the cost of basic food items has actually increased significantly. It is experienced in transportation, where we see daily movement now requires a higher proportion of income. It is experienced in housing. Most of us are familiar with rent that continue to increase and place pressure on household budgets. It's also experienced in education, where we see families are making difficult decisions about school fees and whether to keep their children in one school or the other. It is also experienced in healthcare, where access remains uneven and in many cases, financially burdensome. Now, when we bring these elements together, what we are observing is not a single issue. We are observing a compression of pressures at the household level. Multiple cost variables are rising simultaneously. And when that happens, something important also occurs. Households begin to adjust. They begin to reduce consumption. They defer expenses. They reallocate their limited resources. But over time, these adjustments have limits. And when those limits are reached, stress increases. When this happens, then we begin to see how the families are beginning to struggle. And this brings us to a critical point of interpretation. When citizens express concern or frustration, it is sometimes framed as resistance to reform, but that is often a misreading. What we are seeing is not resistance, it is response, a response to lived economic conditions. And understanding that distinction is essential, and it is important for leadership to really pay attention and understand what the citizens are trying to communicate. Because if frustration is misinterpreted, the response will be misaligned. But if it is correctly understood as a signal, then it becomes valuable information. It tells us where the pressure is intense, and it tells us where intervention is most needed. And it tells us also where the gap between policy and experience is widest. Now, let us connect this back to the framework that we have discussed, the delayed dividend theory, which tells us that reforms take time to yield benefits. The institutional dependence theory that tells us that execution capacity affects how quickly those benefits materialize. So what citizens are experiencing today is not disconnected from reform. It is part of the transition. But this is critical. Transition must be managed, because if the transition is not managed effectively, short-term pain intensifies, trust weakens, and support for reform declines. So leadership must treat citizen experience not as an afterthought, but as a central variable in governance. Because ultimately, policy is judged not by what it intends to do, but by how people feel, what people feel. And until those two begin to align, the question of performance will always continue to suffice. Next slide. All right. I'm going to talk about progress made with the renewed hope agenda. At this point, having examined both the structural context and the lived experience, it is important that we take a balanced view, because credible analysis requires that we recognize progress where it exists. If we look at the current phase of governance, there are areas where meaningful steps have been taken, And these steps should be acknowledged very clearly. First, the policy direction has been clarified. Certain long-standing distortions, particularly in those areas like fuel subsidy and foreign exchange management, have been confronted very directly. And these are not easy decisions. These are, in fact, decisions that many administrations recognize as necessary, but often they postpone due to political and social implications. So the willingness to initiate these reforms reflects a degree of policy courage. Number two, physical realities have been acknowledged more explicitly. Now there is a clear recognition that certain economic arrangements were not sustainable over the long term. And that recognition in itself is important. And it's a big starting point for correction. Number three, signals to investors and external stakeholders have improved. Our policy direction, particularly around market orientation and structural adjustment, have provided really a clearer framework for engagement. And this matters because investment decisions are often based not just on current conditions, but on perceived direction. And then number four, there is continuity in certain infrastructural commitments. Projects like transport, energy, logistics have continued, which suggests a good level of policy continuity. Now, taken together, these elements represent something important. They represent a shift in direction. And direction is very important in this discussion, because without a change in direction from where we are going before now, outcomes cannot change. However, and this is also where analytical balance is essential, a shift in direction is not the same as a change in outcomes. And this decision must be maintained, because while policy direction may be improving, citizen experience is still under pressure. So the question is not whether progress has been made at the level of policy. The question is how effectively is that progress translating into outcomes that are visible, measurable, and felt. Because ultimately, progress is not defined by action alone. It is defined by impact, and that is the standard against which performance must be assessed. Some performance gaps also have existed. Having acknowledged the progress in policy direction, the next step is to evaluate outcomes, because direction without translation does not resolve pressure. When we examine outcomes, several gaps become evident. Number one, inflation remains elevated, especially food prices. And these are not marginal issues. Number two, job creation is not keeping pace yet with expectations. We see pockets of activities, but not yet the scale required to absorb a growing and youthful labor force. Number three, security remains uneven. We still have areas of improvement, but also persistent threats that continue to affect our mobility, affect production and confidence. Number four, public trust is still fragile, not because reforms are absent, but because the link between reform and relief is not yet sufficiently visible. Now, it is important to understand that these are not isolated gaps. They are interconnected, because inflation affects real incomes. Real incomes affect consumption. Consumption affects business viability. Business viability affects employment. And all of these now, affect trust. So what we are observing is a systemic lag between reform input and outcome output. And when such a lag persists, the risk is not only economic, it is also perceptual, because citizens do not track policy pipelines, they track lived experiences. So the question becomes, what kind of leadership is required to close those gaps? And this is where I introduce a critical principle from leadership science, what I describe as the triadic leadership balance, where effective leadership requires equilibrium between vision, duty, and empathy. And I said vision is the ability to define direction and initiate reform like we have seen. Duty, the discipline to enforce execution and follow through. And of course, empathy, the capacity to sustain the legitimacy by recognizing lived experiences. Now, if vision dominates without duty, we get announcement without delivery. If duty dominates without empathy, we get enforcement without legitimacy. And if empathy dominates without direction, we get accommodation without progress. So the challenge is not strength in one dimension, it is balance across all three. And in the context of Nigeria today, the imperative is very clear. Vision has been demonstrated through reform initiation. The next phase requires strengthening duty, which is execution discipline, and deepening empathy, which is the visible relief and fairness that the citizens expect. Because without that balance, reforms may be technically sound, but politically and socially unsustainable. So the performance gaps we observe are not simply indicators of failure. They are indicators of where leadership attention must now intensify, not to reverse reform, but to translate reform into outcomes that people can feel, measure, and trust. Next slide. Reform tension. Okay, at this point, we need to make something very clear. Reform is not an abstract event. Reform is a process that moves through the economy, and as it moves, it produces effects. So to understand current pressure, we must understand how those effects are transmitted. Let us take a simple but powerful example. When fuel prices increase, transport costs increase. That is the first transmission. Now, when transport costs increase, the cost of moving goods also increase. Food, in particular, becomes more expensive to move from farm to market. That is the second transmission. Now, when food price rises, households feel immediate pressure because food is not optional. That is yet a third transmission. And when households face higher food and transport costs simultaneously, real income declines. Even if nominal income remains unchanged, purchasing power falls. That is a fourth transmission. So what we are observing is not random. It is chain reaction from fuel to transport to food to real income. Now, when this chain is activated across a large economy, the effects are widespread and they are immediate, which brings us to an important insight. Reforms set their directions, but transmission determines the experience. Now, let us even go one step deeper. These transmissions have effects, and they're not just inherently negative. They are part of the adjustment process. But the challenge is this. If these effects are not anticipated, managed, and in fact mitigated, then short-term pressure can overwhelm long-term intent. Now, this is where leadership becomes critical, because leadership must not only initiate reform, it must also manage its consequences. And managing consequences requires understanding, and understanding, especially where pressure accumulates. In Nigeria today, pressure is most visible in food affordability, transport costs, household purchasing power. So the task before leadership is not simply to continue reform, it is to intervene intelligently within the transmission chain, to reduce pressure where it is most intense, to stabilize where volatility is highest, and to ensure that adjustment does not translate into prolonged hardship. Now, this brings us to a very important distinction. Reform design is necessary, but reform design alone is not sufficient. So what matters equally is sequencing, buffering, and responsiveness. Because if reform is introduced without adequate buffering mechanisms, the system will absorb shock unevenly. And when shocks are unevenly absorbed, trust declines. So the key takeaway from here is Nigeria is not struggling because reform is occurring. Nigeria is experiencing pressure because the transmission effect of reform are not yet sufficiently managed. And that is where leadership must now focus, not on reversing direction, but on improving the way that direction is being experienced. Next slide. All right. So now, at this point, the analysis becomes really very operational because Once we understand where pressure is coming from, the next question is, where should leadership focus immediately and decisively to produce visible results? And this is where prioritization becomes critical. No government, regardless of capacity, can solve all problems simultaneously. And I repeat that, no government, regardless of its capacity, can solve all problems or even solve all problems simultaneously, because resources are limited, attention is limited, execution capacity is limited. So leadership is not defined by how many problems it acknowledges, it is defined by how effectively it chooses and focuses. Now, in the context of Nigeria today, if we seriously want to address these issues, and if we are serious about converting reform into results, then national effort must concentrate on a small number of high impact areas, not 10, not 15, not 20, just a few. Because concentration creates momentum, and momentum restores confidence. So if I were to distill the priorities based on the analysis we have done so far, they would fall probably within just about 5 critical areas. First, price stability, particularly food affordability, because this is where the pressure is most needed, like right now. 2, security of lives and property, because without safety, economic activity cannot stabilize. Number 3, energy reliability, because without consistent power, productivity remains constrained. Number 4, execution systems, because without that, without the discipline implementation, even the best policies will underperform. And number 5, protection of citizens during reform, because reform must be sustainable, and sustainability requires legitimacy. Now, it is important to emphasize something at this point. These priorities are not arbitrary. They are derived from where pressure is most intense, where impact is probably most immediate, and where visible improvement can restore confidence quickly. Because in a reform environment, perception matters. And perception improves when citizens begin to see movement in areas that affect their daily lives. So prioritization is not about neglecting other areas. It's about sequencing attention in a way that produces early visible wins. Because when citizens begin to see improvement, confidence rises. And when confidence rises, reform becomes easier to sustain. So the task before leadership now is not to expand the agenda. It is to focus the agenda, to concentrate effort where it matters most, and to deliver results that people can feel within a reasonable time frame. Next slide. Stabilize prices. Let us begin with the first priority, price stability, with particular emphasis on food. Now, inflation is often discussed in technical terms, but in reality, it is not just an economic variable. It is a governance variable, because it directly affects how citizens experience leadership. Let me unpack this a little bit. In most economies, inflation can be moderate and manageable. But when inflation is concentrated in food, it becomes something entirely different, because food is non-discretionary. It is not something households can postpone or avoid. And so food is the most frequent and the most unavoidable economic interaction. So when food prices rise, households adjust immediately. They reduce quantity. They switch to low quality substitutes. They begin to reallocate income away from other needs. But over time, again, these adjustments have limits. And when those limits are reached, something begins to happen. Financial stress will increase. Household resilience will decline. And confidence in economic direction weakens. Now, if we situate this within Nigerian context, the issue becomes even clearer. Food inflation today is not driven by a single factor. It is the result of multiple interacting pressures. First, food production constraints. Insecurity in certain areas limit access to farmland. Farmers are not able to cultivate at scale or even are forced to abandon their site. Number 2, logistic inefficiencies. Moving food from farm to market is expensive. Transport costs have increased. Road infrastructure in some cases also add friction. Number 3, post-harvest losses and storage limitations. Because we are aware that a significant portion of our produce is lost before they reach consumers, which means supply is reduced. Number 4, exchange rate effects. Inputs like fertilizers, machinery, and other certain food items are affected by currency movements. So when these factors combine, the result is predictable. Supply becomes constrained, cost increases, prices increase, and households absorb this impact. So stabilizing prices is not a single intervention. It is actually a system intervention. It requires addressing production, logistics, storage, and cost inputs. Now, and this brings us to the leadership implication. If inflation is a governance variable, then price stabilization must be treated as a national priority, not a peripheral issue. Because stabilizing food prices has immediate effect. It will reduce household pressure. It will improve purchasing power. It will restore a degree of confidence. And more importantly, it will create space for other reforms to now begin to happen. Now, let us be very clear about this. Price stabilization does not mean artificial suppression. It means reducing inefficiencies and constraints that unnecessarily drive costs. It means making the system work better, because when the system works better, supply will improve, costs will stabilize, and prices will become more predictable. So the objective here is not short-term relief alone. It is structural stabilization. Because once food prices stabilize, the entire economic experience begins to shift. And when that shift occurs, something important will follow. Confidence begins to return. Next slide. Let's talk about security of lives and property real quick. And this is the second priority, security of lives and property. And it is important that we frame this correctly from the outset. Security is not first an economic issue. It is a human issue. It's about the protection of life. It's about the preservation of dignity, and about the ability of individuals to live, to move, and in fact, to work without fear. That is the foundational responsibility of the state. But while security begins as a human imperative, it quickly becomes an economic one, because once security is compromised, economic activity is disrupted. We can look at this very, very closely. First, agriculture is affected. In regions where insecurity persists, farmers face difficulties accessing their farms. In some cases, cultivation is reduced. In others, they abandon that entirely. So when agricultural production declines, supply reduces. And as we have already established, reduced supply contributes directly to food inflation. Number 2, transport and logistics are affected. Movement of goods become riskier, cost increases, not only because of fuel, but because of uncertainty. And when logistics become unpredictable, supply chain weaken. Number 3, local commerce is disrupted. Markets become less active, trading volumes decline, small businesses operate under uncertainty. Number 4, investment confidence is affected. Both domestic and external investors will begin to assess risk. And where security is uncertain, investment decisions are delayed or redirected. Now, when you bring these effects together, what you see is not a single issue. You're now beginning to see a systemic constraint on economic stability, because security affects production. Production affects supply. Supply affects prices, and prices affect households. So security is not isolated from the economic conversation. It is deeply embedded within it. And this brings us to an important distinction. Security must not only exist, it must be felt. Because citizens do not evaluate security based on policy statements. They evaluate it based on experience. Can they travel safely? Can they go to their farm safely? Can they conduct their businesses without disruption? These are the metrics that matter. Now, from a leadership perspective, this has clear implications. Security must be localized, it must be intelligence-driven, it must be coordinated, and it must be sustained. Because intermittent improvement does not build confidence. Consistency does. Now, we must be very clear, security challenges are very complex. And so they are influenced by social, by economic, and by geographic factors. But complexity does not remove urgency. If anything, it increases it. Because without a stable security environment, economic reforms will underperform. Investment will remain very cautious, and confidence of citizens will remain fragile. So the task before leadership is not simply to respond to insecurity. It is to restore a sense of safety that is visible, that is consistent, and that is trusted. Because once safety is restored, something important will now begin to happen. Economic activity will begin to normalize. Production will increase. Movement will improve. And confidence will begin to come back. So the sequence of priorities, security is not optional. It is actually foundational. Next slide. Energy. So I'm going to turn to the third priority, energy reliability. And again, it is important that we frame this correctly. Energy is often discussed as a sector, but in reality, it is not a sector. It's an infrastructure. More specifically, energy is productivity infrastructure. Because what it does is it underpins almost every form of economic activity. For example, in modern economy, productivity depends on consistency. Businesses require stable operating conditions. Manufacturers require uninterrupted processes. Service providers require reliable systems. And all of these depend on energy. So when energy is unreliable, several things can be happening at the same time. Costs will increase, efficiency declines, competitiveness will weaken, investment is discouraged, and those kind of things. And so, because investors do not only look at market size, they look at operating conditions. And unreliable energy is a major deterrent. So when these factors combine, the effect is systemic. The economy does not collapse, but it underperforms. It grows below its potential. Now, let us bring this back to Nigeria. Nigeria has energy, but availability is not the same as reliability. And reliability is what matters in this discourse, because it is not enough to generate enough power. What matters is whether power is available consistently, predictably, and at the point of use. Now, and this will now introduce another structural challenge. Energy in Nigeria is not just a generation problem, it is a system problem. It involves generation capacity, transmission, constraints, distribution, inefficiencies, and of course, some metering gaps. Metering gaps are also very important. And so when any part of this chain is weak, the entire system underperforms. Now, when you look at it from a leadership perspective, the implication is even clear. Improving energy outcomes requires system-level interventions, not isolated fixes. It requires strengthening generations where capacity is insufficient. It also requires improving transmission where otherwise bottlenecks exist. Enhancing distribution efficiencies and ensuring that consumption is accurately measured and managed. But beyond infrastructure, there is also a governance dimension to it, which is important to us. Because energy systems require regulatory clarity, they require pricing consistency, and they require investment confidence. Now, if we connect this to the broader reform agenda, without reliable energy, business cannot scale, manufacturing remains constrained, and job creation is limited. So even if macroeconomic reforms are successful, their impact will be muted because productivity remains restricted. So energy is not just another priority, it is a multiplier. When energy improves, productivity increases, cost will reduce, competitiveness will improve, and of course, growth will be accelerated. So the task before leadership is to move energy from intermittent availability to reliable infrastructure. Because once that shift occurs, the entire economic system begins to perform very differently. Execution systems. Now, at this stage, we have identified priority areas: price stability, security, energy. But there is a critical question we must also confront quickly before we run. Even if these priorities are correct, how do we ensure that they are actually delivered? Because this is where governance often fails. Not at the level of intention, but at the level of execution. Like we said, Nigeria does not like plans, does not like policies, does not like reform announcement. What we like is what Nigeria has consistently struggled with is something more specific, which is the disciplined, coordinated, and accountable execution of those plans. Now, let us unpack this very quickly. Execution is not simply activity. It is not the number of meetings held. It is not volume of policies announced. Execution is the conversion of intention into measurable outcomes that people can see. And for that conversion to happen, certain conditions must exist. First, clear accountability. For want of time. 2, measurable targets. 3, time-bound milestones. 4, real-time feedbacks and corrections. And these are very, very, very important because execution is not linear. It has its own challenges. So systems must be able to detect problems early and adjust quickly. That's adaptability. And this brings us back to institutional dependence theory, because execution systems are only as strong as the institutions that operate them. If institutions cannot report accurately or enforce accountability or correct deviations, then execution will become inconsistent. And this is why we must be very clear. Execution fails not because plans are absent, but because systems are weak. Now, from a leadership perspective, this has profound implications because improving execution is not about announcing more policies. It's about building delivery architecture. This includes central performance tracking mechanisms, ministry level scorecards, and those kind of things. Because when delivery is structured, performance will improve. Bottlenecks will be quickly identified, and accountability will become real. Now, execution is actually where credibility is built or lost, because citizens do not experience policy design, they experience outcomes. So even the most well-designed reform will fail in perception if the execution is weak, which brings us to a final critical point: systems. Systems, again, not speeches, deliver outcomes. And unless Nigeria strengthens its execution system, the gaps between promise and performance will persist. So the task before leadership is very clear: not to expand policy, but to strengthen delivery. Because once delivery improves, everything else begins to move accordingly. Number, protect citizens. So having established a few of those, let's look quickly at the citizen itself. We have already looked at direction and the execution system. But this important dimension is essential. And that is the experience of citizens during reform. Because reform is not implemented in a vacuum. It is implemented within society, and society responds. So that will now take us back to the delayed dividend theory, where we talked about how gains are delayed and gains are immediate. We established that reforms often produce immediate pressure and delayed benefits. And this is expected. But what is not automatic is how that pressure is managed. That is where leadership now becomes critical. Because if reform is implemented without adequate cushioning, the burden is transferred disproportionately to households. And when that happens, several things will follow. Financial stress will intensify, public trust will weaken, support for reform will decline. And when support declines, then sustainability becomes uncertain. And this brings us here to another principle. Reform must be technically sound, but also socially sustainable. And social sustainability depends on perceived fairness. Because citizens are willing to endure difficulty, but they must see that burden is shared. They must see that leadership is disciplined and that relief is possible. And now, what does protecting citizens actually mean in real sense? It does not mean reversing reform, no. It does not mean avoiding difficult decisions, no. In fact, that is good for government could do that. But it means introducing targeted measures that will reduce pressure where it is most intense. For example, transport support, targeted financial support, stabilization programs, and structured dialogue around wages and cost of living, those kind of things. Now, it is important to emphasize that these are not acts of generosity, they are actually strategy to make sure that the reforms are sustained and sustainable. Because when reforms are buffered effectively, pressure becomes manageable, adjustment becomes gradual, and confidence is now restored. So If we connect it back to leadership, empathy in leadership is not emotional, it is structural. It is the ability to anticipate how policy will affect people and to design interventions that will maintain legitimacy. So when we speak about protecting citizens, we are not introducing a separate agenda. We are strengthening the reform agenda itself, because a reform that is not socially sustainable will not be sustained. So key takeaway from this will be that reform without visible relief is politically and socially unsustainable. And leadership must ensure that as reform progresses, citizens can see and can feel and as well believe that improvement is possible. Next slide. Okay, let's talk about primary healthcare as economic infrastructure. Up to this point, we have discussed economic reform, security, energy, execution. But there is a deeper level or a deeper layer that underpins all of this. And that is the condition of the people themselves. Because no economy performs better than the health of its people. Now, in many policy discussions, primary healthcare is often discussed as social service, sometimes to be funded when, something to be funded when we have some extra cash, or something to be expanded gradually, or something to be discussed under welfare. But the framing is incomplete, because primary health care is not just a social service, it is an economic infrastructure. And we must look at this very closely. Every economy depends on human productivity, and human productivity depends on the physical and the mental well-being. Now, when individuals are healthy, several things happen. They work consistently, they learn more effectively, they participate more actively in economic life, and they contribute more reliably to output. But when health is compromised, the opposite occurs. Now, let us make this concrete within the Nigerian context. So, yeah, if you consider a farmer who is unable to access basic health care, you can understand what that means. A preventable illness will now reduce productivity for him. Output will decline, income will decline. If you multiply that across Nigerians, you know what that means. So you begin to see a macroeconomic effect. The same thing happens with a trader who falls sick frequently because of his condition. So business activity becomes inconsistent, revenue becomes unstable. Now, if you multiply that across many markets, you see the macroeconomic impact. The same thing goes to a civil servant with some chronic conditions. Productivity declines, absenteeism increases, efficiency is reduced. Now, if you scale that across many sectors, you begin to see something systemic. So what we are observing is health is not just a personal issue, it is an economic variable. Now, let us take it one step further. When primary health care is weak, two things will happen simultaneously. Disease burden will increase, and the healthcare cost will rise, often at the household level. And this creates even double impact, reduced productivity, and increased financial pressure. Now, if you look at it from policy perspective, this is inefficient because resources are being consumed to treat conditions that otherwise should have been prevented. So strengthening primary health care is not simply about improving health outcomes. It's about improving economic efficiency. It's about reducing avoidable costs. It's about sustaining workforce productivity. Now, what does this imply for leadership? It implies that primary health care must be repositioned, not as a peripheral sector, but as a core component of economic strategy. It requires accessible frontline services, preventive services, early diagnosis, and community-level health infrastructure. Because when primary health care functions effectively, disease burdens will begin to go down, productivity will improve, household resilience will increase, and long-term growth will become more sustainable. So if we connect this now back to the renewed hope agenda, if the goal is economic recovery and inclusive prosperity, then human capital cannot be treated as secondary. It must be central. Because an economy cannot sustain growth if its population is persistently unhealthy. So the key insight here is simple but powerful. A healthy population is not a social outcome. It is an economic asset. And until that is fully recognized in policy execution, a significant portion of Nigeria's growth potential will remain unrealized. Now let's talk about water real quick. If primary healthcare represents one layer of human capital, then water represents an even more foundational layer beneath it, because before health systems and healthcare system intervention, something else determines health outcomes, and that is water. Now, in many policy discussions, water is treated as a utility, something associated with household convenience, something to be addressed through infrastructure projects when resources permit. But this framing again is incomplete, because water is not just a utility. Water quality is economic infrastructure. Let me explain that. Water is directly linked to diseases, and disease is directly linked to productivity. Now, when water quality is poor, the consequences are immediate and widespread. Waterborne diseases, diarrhea, typhoid, cholera, and all of them, and even other non-communicable diseases become more prevalent. Now, these are often described as health issues, but if we understand them, the economic implications, when children fall ill frequently, how it affects learning outcomes, human capital development is affected too. Now, when adults fall sick, work is interrupted, income is reduced, productivity declines. Now, when households face recurring illnesses, financial pressure increases, resources are diverted from investment. So what we observe is not just a health problem, it's an economic disruption. Now, if you scale this, when a significant portion of our people are exposed to unsafe water, workforce efficiency will decline, healthcare costs will increase, household residents will weaken, and national productivity will be affected. Now, this will create yet another important insight, because water quality operates upstream of healthcare. It determines how much of diseases enter the system in the first place. So if water quality improves, something more powerful now begins to unfold. Disease burden will begin to decline before treatment is even required. Now, this has multiplier effects also. It reduces pressure on health systems. It reduces out-of-pocket expenditure. It improves workforce consistency, and it enhances overall economic performance. Now, from a leadership perspective, this has clear implications. Water policy must be understood as economic policy. Water quality must be seen as productivity policy. Access to safe water must be understood as development policy, because when water systems function effectively, health will improve, productivity will improve, and economic stability will be strengthened. Now, if we connect it back now to our renewed hope agenda in Nigeria, if Nigeria is indeed serious about improving productivity, reducing poverty, and strengthening human capital, then water quality cannot remain central. It must be central, because without safe water, disease will persist, productivity will decline, economic gains are undermined. So, key takeaway from here: a country that does not guarantee safe water cannot fully unlock its economic potential. And that is why water must be repositioned, not as a secondary issue, but as a core pillar of national development strategy. Now, at this point, we have discussed reform, direction, execution, human capital, infrastructure, but there is even one more question that we must confront. How do we ensure that progress once achieved is sustained? Because one of our recurring challenges is not just achieving progress, but maintaining it. Now, this brings us back to the central principle that has been consistent throughout this our discussion. Systems outlast individuals. Systems outlast individuals. So policies can change, leadership can change, policies can shift, but systems, when they are strong, they provide continuity. Now, if we look at Nigeria's historical experience, we observe a pattern. Progress is made in certain periods, but that progress is not always consolidated. And over time, momentum is lost. Now, why does this happen? It happens because reforms are often anchored around individuals rather than around our institutions. So when leadership changes, direction now changes. And when direction changes, continuity weakens. Now, this is precisely where our institutional dependence theory becomes relevant again. If institutions depend heavily on individuals, then performance fluctuates with leadership. But if our institutions are strong, then performance becomes more stable. So the goal of sustainable reform is not simply to implement policies. It is to build systems that can sustain those policies over time. Now, what does this mean in practical terms? It means civil service performance systems, regulatory institutions, judicial processes, our sectoral systems, particularly the areas such as power, infrastructure, public finance, because when these systems function effectively, policies are implemented consistently, investors gain confidence, citizens experience stability. Now, if we connect it back to leadership again, leadership is not only about initiating reform, it's about institutionalizing reform. Because a reform that depends on a single administration is fragile. A reform that is embedded in systems is durable. So the real measure of success is not just what changes today, it is what continues to function tomorrow, regardless of who is in office. Now, if Nigeria can make that shift from personality-driven governance to system-driven governance, then something fundamental will begin to change. Performance will now become consistent. Progress will now become cumulative, and development will now become sustainable. So the task before leadership is not only to act, but to build structures that ensure that action endures beyond this regime. Next slide. So I will look at metric dashboard very quickly. I'm looking at my time already. If we are serious about moving from promise to performance, then we must also be serious about measurement. Because without measurement, performance becomes subjective. It becomes a matter of perception rather than evidence. And when performance is not measured clearly, two things will begin to happen. Accountability will weaken, and progress will become difficult to track. So the question becomes, how should Nigerians at home and in diaspora assess whether progress is actually being made? Now, it is important that we keep this practical. We do not need hundreds of indicators. We need a focused set of indicators that will reflect real outcomes. Let me highlight a few. Inflation, particularly food inflation, employment and income dynamics, energy availability and reliability, security indicators, infrastructure efficiency. And this includes factors like transport costs, logistics time, and those kind of ease of movement, institutional performance, and finally, public trust. Even though it is less tangible, but it's not less important. Do citizens believe that progress is actually happening? Do they see evidence that reforms are actually translating into outcomes? Now, why are these metrics important? Because they shift the conversation from what is being said to what is being achieved. They allow citizens to evaluate governance based on outcomes, not just announcements. They allow policymakers to identify where progress is occurring and where it is not. And they create a common framework for discussion. So if we connect it back to leadership again, leadership that is confident in its direction should also be confident in its measurement, because measurement provides clarity. It reveals gaps. It also enables course correction. So the objective here is not to create pressure, it is to create visibility, because when performance is visible, accountability will improve, trust will strengthen, and decision making will now become even more informed. So we must move forward, and if we must move forward, the question should not simply be what is being promised, but it should now change to what is being measured and what is improving, because this is how performance becomes real. Next slide. All right. By 2027, we expect that if we continue to deliver as analyzed in this our conversation, we should start seeing results. We have discussed how to measure performance. We have looked at a few issues around structural changes. The next question is now forward-looking. If the right actions are taken consistently and deliberately, we should be able to see how the result of the reform should start, manifesting in the lived experiences of people. The reforms, as economically stable as they are, as economically sound as they are, will now begin to manifest commensurate enough results, to match up with its intention ab initio. So we are by 2027, we hope that the deliberate intention and institutionalization of the reform will lead to better outcomes. Next slide. All right. Let me talk about shared risk. I think I have two more slides. Let me talk about shared responsibility real quick. At this point, we have examined leadership, we have examined institutions, reforms, and outcomes, but there is a fundamental truth we must now confront. Nations are not built by government alone. This is one of the most important insights in governance, because while government plays a central role, it is not the only actor. A nation is a system, and system includes public institutions, private enterprises, social societies, civil societies, social groups, and citizens. So if we return briefly to the baton stewardship theory, we see something important happen from there. The baton is not held by government alone. In fact, all of us. It is held in different ways at different points by all of us. Every professional, every entrepreneur, every public servant, every citizen. And this reframes leadership a great deal for us, because leadership is not an office. It is responsibility. Responsibility is how we act, how we contribute, how we respond to national challenges. Now, and we need to make this very practical. Government can design policy, but businesses determine investment and job creation. Institutions can set standards, but professionals will determine how these standards are applied. Policies can be implemented, but citizens determine whether systems function through their daily lives and behavior towards it. And this is important. It does not reduce the responsibility of government. Government still remains central, but it expands the understanding of contribution, because if governance is a system, then performance is a collective output. Now, this has an important implication for this discussion. The Renewed Hope agenda must not be seen as a government project or any party's project. It must be seen as a national project, because its success depends on how institutions function, how businesses respond, how professionals perform, and how citizens engage. Now, let us consider the diaspora in this context briefly. The diaspora is also not external to this. It's part of Nigeria, because it represents knowledge, capital, networks, and influence. So the question is not whether the diaspora is connected. The question is how effectively that connection is structured. Because if properly integrated, diaspora can become a force multiplier. And this brings us to a final point on this slide. If progress is to be sustained, it must be owned. Not just observed, not just criticized, but owned. Because ownership changes behavior. It shifts individuals from spectators to participants. And when that shift occurs at scale, national outcome begins to change. So the call here is practical. Every Nigerian must ask himself, what role am I playing in strengthening the system? What role am I playing in bringing about the Renewed Hope agenda? Because ultimately, the strength of a nation is the sum of the responsibilities of its people. Next slide. Now, at the right place, in the spirit of shared responsibility, I'll briefly talk about the work we do at right place within this broader context as I round up. Because if we argue that leadership is responsibility, then contribution must be visible. At Right Place Health, we focus our focus is mainly on the areas that are really affect human capital and productivity, and that is our own little contribution to the agenda. We engage in primary health strengthening, water quality advocacy, telehealth and access models, and public health education. Now, these are not isolated initiatives. They are actually aligned to the broader understanding of the agenda. Now, that health and water are not just social concerns we have already established, that they are productivity infrastructure. So we are doing a little bit to support that infrastructure, and improving them contributes directly to economic performance. Now, at the center for leadership and strategy, we focus on complementary activities: leadership development, governance systems, executive training, policy analysis and modeling. So again, the objective here is not activity for its own sake. It is alignment, because alignment is key. Alignment with the very issues we have discussed today, with execution discipline, with institutional strength, with capacity building, with leadership capacity, because ultimately nations arise and nations grow not only on ideas, but on the capacity to implement those ideas very effectively. So our contribution, in essence, is focused on trying to strengthen that capacity. Now, let me emphasize something very clearly here. These efforts are not presented as solutions in themselves. They are contributions, because national progress is cumulative. It is built through the aggregation of efforts across multiple actors. And what matters is that those efforts are aligned towards common objectives. So the intention here is to contribute where we can in ways that strengthen the system, improve outcomes, and support the broader national agenda. And so we invite everybody else to do the same. Now, my final words. Let me begin to close. We have examined this moment from multiple angles. We have looked at history, we have explored structure, we have analyzed reform, we have considered citizen experience, and we have outlined leadership imperatives. Now, the question remains, what is the overall verdict? And I have to be very clear here. Nigeria does not lack ideas. Nigeria does not lack ambition. Nigeria does not lack policy frameworks. What Nigeria has struggled with is consistency in implementation. Very specific, the disciplined conversion of promise into performance. And that is where the renewed hope agenda is being tested. Now, if baton stewardship theory teaches us anything, it is that no administration starts from zero. Every administration is responsible for improving what it inherits. If delayed dividend theory teaches us anything from this discourse, reform requires patience, but patience must be sustained by visible progress. Now, if institutional dependence theory teaches us anything today, it is that outcomes are determined not only by leadership, but by the strength of institutions. And if leadership science teaches us anything today, it is that vision, duty, and empathy must operate together, not in isolation. Now, when we bring all of this together, the conclusion becomes very clear. The success of the renewed hope agenda will not be determined by the number of policies announced or the scale of ambition expressed. It will be determined by the strength of execution systems, the functionality of institutions, the management of reform transition, and the visibility of outcomes in the lives of citizens. Because ultimately, governance is not what is said, it is what is experienced. Now, let me say this very clearly. Nigeria's situation is not one of impossibility, it is one of alignment. Alignment between policy and execution, alignment between reform and relief, between leadership and institutions, and between ambition and discipline. Because when alignment is achieved, progress accelerates. Now, let us return to the question that has guided this conversation. Can Nigeria deliver on its promise? The answer is yes, but not automatically, not by intention alone, not by announcement. It will require disciplined execution, strong institutions, responsible leadership, and active national participation from all of us. So this is not just a government test, it is a national test. Because every Nigerian, in one way or the other, holds a part of the baton. And the question we must each answer is this: what are we doing with the baton in our hands? Let this be the moment where our hope becomes visible, our reform becomes real, our promises become performance. Because Nigeria has not exhausted her possibilities. What we lack is not potential, it is alignment, discipline, and execution. The question is not whether Nigeria can work. The question is whether we will make it work in our time. Thank you very much, and may God bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Thank you so very much, sir, for that in-depth analysis of today's subject. For the first time since the history of this program, we found a special guest who single-handedly spent the whole 2 hours for presentation. That if I was bowled over by what happened last week, I think I'm doubly bowled over by what just happened today, because I'm thinking in my head, did we just go through that 2 hours? I think it shows that our special guest is indeed a scholar. Because when you stay before a scholar, it's like staying before a pastor. You must be patient because they have a lot to say. Or and until they are able to say what they have, you'll be cutting short the kind of blessings that you're supposed to get. So, and I feel blessed today. I don't know about anybody else, but I feel blessed today. So I just have one before I go because we were supposed to have a question and answer session. We're still going to have that. So I just need to ask our special guest now, because we have spent the whole 2 hours now. Can we give about 30 minutes to give our people, because I'm sure a lot of people will want to. I've got a couple of hands up now, and many more people will want to have their hands up. So I'm just trying to seek your indulgence, sir. If you can spare us another 30 minutes for us to be able to allow people to ask questions, sir. Is that okay by you?
I'll give us another hour.
Oh, God bless you, sir. Thank you so very much. You see, this is what I keep saying. We have receptive leaders in Nigeria who are always ready to give us their time. What can I say? We again, once again, like it's been the case for the past couple of months now, we have been taken back to school again, just like we've been week in, week out. And today is very, very special in the sense that apart from the fact that it went on for almost 2 hours, I don't know about anybody else, I found today's presentation very, very deep. And whilst he was going about it, I remember what my pastor used to say to me. He says, only the deep reaches to the deep. And that's what I found from today because, wow. Because not only did our special guest analyze not just the topic for today, but the renewed hope administration that we have presently in the country. He analyzed all the reforms that have been turned out, the effects on the populace, why that effect it is what it is. I think it's just a classic case, like I said earlier on, of the deep reaching out to the deep. And it takes somebody who is very deep in thoughts to really assimilate what just went on here today. And I just hope that every single one of us here and across the globe assimilate everything that's been said here today. Because for me, I've always believed in Nigeria and I've always believed in this administration. But tonight, my belief has gone threefold, fourfold, fivefold in all the reforms that has been said. Because it's the reason why people are shouting hunger was just explained to us today now. That reforms are made for the future, whereas people live in the present. So if reforms are made for the future and people live in the present, of course, you don't expect the reforms that has been made now to yield result now, especially because the reform are coming as a result of mismanagement of decades. And I think I've said on this program so many times that we've had two retired military men, generals, who by their training should have been the one to take the bulls by the horn to set this country aright. But somehow they chickened out. Both of them. I make bold to say that. Both of them chickened out. And I remembered I once said here before that former President Obasanjo should have been the person doing all these reforms now. Because at that time when he took over in 1999, the stakes were not as high as it is now. But guess what? He chickened out. Even though he was a war veteran, he chickened out. Same thing with the late President Buhari, may God rest his soul. But he's now taking a civilian now. The military like to call us bloody civilians, but it's taking a civilian now to do what they should have done to reset the clock of the country and set us on a prosperous trajectory. So that is why I wasn't surprised when people started shouting being power and the rest of them, because I knew at the time that what this government was doing was just trying to retune a fractured leg. And in the process of doing that, there will be a lot of pain that people will feel, which was what people were feeling. And thank God, those hard but necessary reforms. I think I said it in my Saturday message this morning that those hard but necessary reforms are now yielding positive. And that is what exactly Dr. Chukwumezie Okolo has just analyzed, because he broke everything down into a layman's language. So thank you so very much, sir, for this. I don't even know how to begin to thank you, because not only did you take us to school, the issues regarding our country, why we got to where we are now, and why we should remain resolute in our support for the current administration, who seems to be trying to correct the anomaly of yesteryears, is just there in droves. You brought everything back to us today now, and I just hope that Nigerians at home and in diaspora will key into this and begin to support the government we have now. Thank you so very much, sir. And again, thank you very much for giving us another 1 hour for us to have, because I know there's a lot of people here who, based on your presentation, will want to ask you a lot of questions. So I'm going to be handing over to my co-host now. What she will then do is to take 2 questions at a time. When she takes those 2 questions, then she will yield the floor to you to respond to them. Thank you ever so much, and thank you to your family too, because it takes an understanding family to allow their man, the head of the house, to come and sit with Nigerians and begin to talk for 2 or 3 hours. Thank you so much, and may God continue to endow you with more wisdom and to bless you and your generations. Thank you so very much. So right about now, I'm going to be yielding the floor now to my co-host Hajia Rikia Bello Abakar. You have the floor now, madam. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome again, Dr. Okolo, to our Renewed Hope Global Home. You really did us good today. Like our chairman said, we've never had anyone that went this far, took over the 2 hours. Thank you very much, sir. And like I said, welcome. I've got 3 people, but like our chairman said, we'll go with 2 first. The first one is Samuel Adekola, and then after him, I have Michael's iPhone. So I'll yield the floor now to Samuel Adekola to either give us your questions or comments, and then Mr. Michael's iPhone should be on standby. Thank you. Are you there now, Samuel?
Yeah, I'm here very much. Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yes, my name is Dr. Samuel Adekola. I'm a pharmacist.
Oh, okay.
And I'm from Ondo State. I must, thank you very much. I must sincerely appreciate Dr. Chukwumezie Okolo, a pharmacist, for this type of elaborate lecture. I wouldn't have expected a pharmacist to do this much to politics and economy. And sincerely, yes, I feel highly encouraged and impressed by his analysis. And I must say, I really feel very happy. So I thank you very much, Dr. Okolo, for that wonderful output. Yes, I have been trying to rattle my mind why, in fact, I didn't know the organizer of this event, sincerely yours. I thought it was the right quality pharmacy group that was actually, until now, that I come to understand. Yes, and that also brings me to where I wanted to make a comment. Yes, sincerely yours. I must say that from what I've been able to see here, of course, you've put it across the way it is in Nigerian situation, the government reforms and the outcomes that we're having right now. If there's anything for me, I've seen with the reform which we are having right now. We must appreciate the President Tinubu for effrontery to commence these reforms, and sincerely appreciate him for how far he's gone. But we cannot, but as a citizen and objective professional too, from what you have put on the table, we are saying why it looks as if the reforms have also not, there's a lot of trust, just like you mentioned. There are trust issues right now in the society, in the country, across the globe, across the country. So, which is why I think in my analysis of why do we have this, I think we can also take away our eye from politics. Sincerely yours, I want to believe that the current reform has also been I mean, there's something we call alloys in chemistry. Has also been disturbed or I mean distracted or have been affected by politics, and that's boiled down onto the duty implementation. Sincerely yours, politics had actually been a bigger issue in the effectiveness of the reform that we have currently, and I hope that the president and his handlers, particularly his handlers, will also be made. I mean, could sit down to let him know that we hope and we pray that Nigerians give him another opportunity for a second time, which we know ordinarily is entitled to by what we have in Nigeria. But I really want to say that if he's going to go into the second term of the administration, then politics must sincerely be taken out. Because by that time, I think it probably does not have anything at stake in terms of, oh, I want this one to vote for me. I want this one to support me. I want this one to so perhaps because sincerely there are things which I expected would have naturally bring a meantime outcome. I mean, something to respite to support the public, the population, the people, to down the tension, to mitigate the 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 actions of the reform on the publics, But because of politics, I mean, you cannot do away with it because man, look at, I mean, when we talk about one of the things you talked about in your slide was the issue of budget performance. Sincerely speaking, if we're going to be facing the reality in the couple of few years, I mean, our budget performance has not been very good. And that's the truth. And the reason for all of this is because the duty and, of course, the handlers, institutional building. I mean, bringing in, focusing on implementing, of these policies, processes has been a little bit amalgamated or has been a little bit diluted with influence of politics. But I hope and I pray that because the professor said that yes, it is. He mentioned that perhaps the military guys would have been the people to give us the reform, but unfortunately they didn't do it. Yes, now a bloody civilian have done it. Again, we must want to say that appreciate the fact that now that he has done it, I mean, Nigerians we temper justice with mercy and probably give him the second chance. But if he has to go in for the second chance, this must be very clear that politics must be divulged from the implementation of this reform agenda. Because Nigeria, today I'm a pharmacist. I say with also modesty, my pharmacy is almost going down, it's almost failing. I say it because of the harsh environment. I buy fuel at 1,300 naira to fuel the to power the pharmacy. How much do I sell? I mean, purchasing power of people has gone down. But no, it's going to be worse. And the truth about it is that it's going to be worse if you want to experiment with another group of persons. And that's the truth, which is why I want to plead with Nigerians if the renewable agenda could be given the opportunity to have this tenor completed. But while he goes into it, he must please be serious with Nigeria, take Nigeria serious, and divert politics from the performance. I mean, from the implementation of the reform. I thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Adekola, for your contribution. I now go to Mr. Michael's iPhone. Michael's iPhone, are you there? Are you ready?
Why is it? Let me ask him to unmute.
Are you on mute? Please.
Let me. It's not coming up on me. You can ask him to unmute if you can see him on your screen.
I can't see him on my screen. Michael, ready?
Where is it again? Michael's iPhone. Okay, I've asked him to unmute now.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Michael, are you ready now?
Yes, good evening, everybody.
Yeah.
I'm Dr. Michael Tomari. I'm also a pharmacist. And Dr. Okolo really made me very proud today, and my other colleague, Dr. Kola, for what he actually contributed to. I just want to commend the speaker, Fam Okolo. He has actually made me understand the reason why our president said Buhari I am Buhari, why Buhari is me. So that is what we call baton worship theory.
Yeah.
And honestly, even though I've been supporting the government for so long, most time my spirit mostly win, but the likes of Ambassador J.K. Adebola strengthened it. So from what you said today, I also realized the feeling that I was feeling was probably from the delayed dividends theory that you actually expatiated to us. I want to see employ Dr. Okolo to make this lecture available to us, and possibly if we can be having this kind of thing on video, because I've never been impressed as I was today. And more kudos to him, and kudos to Ambassador JK and the team for bringing a talented and patriotic Nigeria on board to talk to us today. God bless everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tomari. Our special guests, do you have any contribution to make about the two participants who commended?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
At least I'm happy that pharmacists are here to support their own.
Yes.
As men of honor, we join hands to make Nigeria great. So thank you, my senior colleagues, for being on the call. I appreciate your support. Now, pharmacist Adekola made quite some impressive good points, and I resonate with his sentiments, like that the reform may have been somehow stalled or not really bringing the dividend that is expected because of politics. And if you look at the renewed hope agenda properly, you realize that a lot of Nigerians look at it as APCT. And I think that is part of where the problem is. Renewed hope agenda is not an APC thing. It is Nigerian national aspiration.
True.
And when we begin to see it as Nigerian national aspiration, then we will have what it takes, the boldness, commitment that it requires to make it work. Now, when we remove our political lenses and look at what the renewed hope agenda set to achieve, it was perfectly designed to reposition Nigeria. Yes. And so, without singing its praise, where the problem has been is rightly in the implementation, and those are the gaps. And so, once the leadership tightens up the implementation and removes politics out of it, I'm sure that document or this program, because it's not a document, the program will really in the future position Nigeria for greatness. And so I agree with him that we should divert politics out of that. Now, Pharmacist Michael mentioned something around making the presentation available. Yes. As soon as this call is over, Ambassador will have the presentation, and I also have a policy brief that I will share with him so that he can share with anybody. So that if you don't have all the time to listen to the 2 hours of you can read the 3 pages of policy brief that summarizes all of what we have done today. And if you want to, Michael talked about having these kind of meetings with all pleasure. That's what Right Place is about. We are happy to honor any invitations, like we honored Ambassador Jekels. We are happy to be in any space to contribute our own little way to policy discourse, to governance, and to implementation of reforms and regulation agenda, to move Nigeria forward. I think that's what I have to say for now. Now, if you want to know more about the theories, Michael, then you have to reach out afterwards. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Before Hajia comes back onto the program, I just wish to say this to the whole world, Nigerians in Nigeria and across the whole world, that even before the special guest spoke about making the presentation available to us, I've already made up my mind that this presentation is destined for the villa. Because for me, there are a lot of, you see, this is why it is, I think there was one VVIP who told us here, very young guy, can't remember his name now, one of the guys who works in the government, when we were talking about thinking inside the box. And the guy came up and said, why think inside the box? Why do you even have a box in the first place? So thinking inside the box means you are compartmentalizing yourself. And that is the kind of deja vu moment I had tonight. And that is why I have made up my mind that I will discuss it with my leader that this very presentation is bound for the villa. Of course, we'll share it with anybody who wants to have a copy, but trust me, it is going straight to the villa because there's a lot that this government can learn from what we've just learned here today. So I just thought I should put that out there now. So this is what it is. Thank you so very much. So Hajia, you have the floor now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Okolo, I've got 2 more hands raised. The first one is Ade Shola, and then I have another one, Nuruddin. So Ade Shola, you have the floor now, while Nuruddin should be on standby. Thank you. Ade Shola, are you there?
I've asked Ade Shola to unmute now. You can just unmute yourself now, Ade Shola, please, so you can be able to talk.
Ade Shola, try again. Have you unmuted?
Okay, I've asked him or her to unmute again. You just need to click on the...
Okay. Am I on now?
Yeah,
Yes,
we can hear you.
All right. Well, should I just say I'm a victim of accident or incident to this presentation.
Okay.
And I honestly just felt, okay, I was just going through the X platform. Then I saw this say we are live now. And it was just about, I think, 10 or 9 minutes into it. Then I joined. I never knew or hoped or believed I would be logged on up till the end of that presentation. But it is what it is, because even I was moving around with my phone because I didn't want to miss any part of it. Wow. It was a wonderful one. Well, by introduction, my name is Aremo Adeshola, and this is my first time ever on this platform with you.
Welcome. And welcome to the Renewed Hope. Thank you so very much for joining.
Yeah. I'm actually a media practitioner. I am also a member of the Peace Institute of Nigeria.
Okay.
Well, with everything Prof said, I would say one thing, and with other contributors, and I would want to just say one thing. We are still feeling the same way. I think we are not supposed to feel about this government. It's not because of a blind support, but I think there's something that is missing with this government. It is just what Prof said in between his presentation, communication.
Yeah.
I will tell you for free.
Hmm.
There are more than 10 things that this government can just sit on. Just like Mr. Chairman said, removal of subsidy alone, it is an achievement that any government will say, I have done and I have done it.
Hmm.
And you remove the subsidy and the nation never collapsed as it was set to have.
Yeah.
It was predicted that if Nigeria floats its currency, we will find ourselves in the likes of what's it called, Venezuela and what's the name of Bangladesh.
Yeah.
But it never happened.
Hmm.
IMF came back and said, we are studying your economic policies.
Hmm.
So I will tell you for free, Nigerians are buying rice now at 45,000.
Hmm.
Compared to 3 years ago when they bought it at 100,000 or 98,000. That is 45,000 or more in the pockets of ordinary individuals. But it is the eloquence of this government, of the administration, that is making people now feel like, oh, you are not doing anything. Because the truth is, if you cannot blow your own trumpet and blow it rightly, nobody will blow it for you.
True.
Just like the president told the opposition, if you cannot mend your home, your houses, we will not do it for you.
Yeah, it's not my business. Yeah. True.
Communication is essential. And also, one very important thing, it's unfortunate that I had to park. I'm driving. I actually jotted something, but I cannot go over them now. One very major important thing I want to end with here is that fixing a country is just like, thank God we have pharmacists in the building who are in the medical line. It's just like fixing a sick individual. You have to be brutally honest about it. You don't, because you like your father or your relative or your word, you don't because you like them and ask the doctor not to tear them apart when they had to be operated upon.
Oh, Lord. Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Adeshala. You seem to have disappeared.
I'm rounding up. The guy that came
Oh,
up did not look at anybody. He just went ahead and he's doing what he's doing. So thank you so much for the opportunity. And I hope to be on this platform any other time you want to have it. Thank you.
you're very welcome. You're very welcome.
Can you please send me your number so that every time we have a event like this, I'll be sending you the e-flyer. I'm not sure. Is the chat line up now? Okay, let me just
It
give you
is.
my telephone number straight away now. Are you calling from UK or from where? Oh, he's gone again now. He's gone.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, let's go. I will leave my number on there. So anybody who wants to be joining us, who just joined us for the first time and wants to be joining us, well, I just need your number. As soon as I have your number, every week we'll send you our updates. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Okolo, sir, back to you. I'll yield the floor to you now. If you need to give us more presentation before I hand over to my chairman. Dr.
Dr. Okolo.
Okay, I can hear you now.
Okay.
Good. Yes, I said I'm just going to yield the floor to you. We had two people, one person come up, Adeshala, who commended your presentation as well.
Yeah, Mr. Yes, okay, so yes, that was Mr. Aremu Adeshola, the media practitioner.
That's right.
Yeah, okay, so I agree with him, and we highlighted that also somewhere. When you look at the document, you will see that communication is a very important aspect of a reform, of reform. And so we're not going to say that communication is not happening, but I think what it feels like is that it is not happening in commensurate with what the reform is about and what is happening. And so there is a need to strengthen communication of what is going on. It also comes again back to the fact that when we all embrace the agenda as a Nigerian project and a Nigerian thing, and because then communication will be able to help people understand that this, because that's what you call reframing. In that presentation, I reframed primary healthcare, I reframed water, I reframed a few things. So when you reframe this agenda as a Nigerian thing and communicate it accordingly, I'm sure it will go a long way in helping to get some buy-in and make it even more sustainable. So yeah, so people like Adeshola, we need them to show ownership as well. He's in the media space. Take ownership in some ways and look in that direction and see how he can support to make that happen. Otherwise, for example, he talked about how people are buying rice at 45,000, which otherwise was not expected if the reform was not happening or was not bringing some dividend in some ways. I'm sure that in some ways we can connect that to some of the dividends, because reality is, even when the reform happened and some subsidies were removed, the system adjusts, and then a resilient system will adjust. And Nigeria is such a resilient system. So even though we may not have been seeing results in every facet, but I'm sure in some areas results are already trickling in. And so communication will bring it even to the fore, to where we can start seeing. I must say it again, that the Renewed Hope agenda is a very economically sound program that is capable of repositioning Nigeria. The implementation and the communication will now make all the difference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. I'll now hand over to my chairman, Ambassador J.K. Adebola.
Thank you so very much, Hadia, for that segment. I think I concur with our special guest, because he made some salient points while he was doing his presentation, which, because of the paucity of time, I kind of overlooked. One of which is that reforms produce destructions first, then benefit later, which speaks to what the last participant was talking about. Lack of information, because this is the kind of information that we expect people in government to be drumming to the ears of everyone in the country. Because for me, this is the first time I heard it today, that reforms produce destructions first, then benefit later. And this month is the third year. I think we're completing 3 years now of this administration, and we have a lot of spokesperson for the president. These are the kind of things that this can be made, how do I call it now, a cliche, or maybe some kind of PR, what is it called again? Some kind of PR line that should be drummed into the ears and the minds of Nigerians, that reforms produce destructions first, then benefit later. If that is being drummed into our people, I'm sure those crying Ebion Power will begin to think twice, to say, okay, maybe this is what we need to go through for us to. I think I've said it so many times on this program that Nigeria's case is like somebody who's been diagnosed with cancer, and he was advised by his oncologist or something they call them, that he has to go through some kind of surgery procedure to correct or to take out that whatever. And he was given a plan. And now he was given. Of course, when they give you that kind of diagnosis, they will tell you what the side effects are, right? Now, when he had the side effects, he now said, "Oh, I would rather I don't need all those side effects. I don't want to go through that. I'd rather be taking painkillers." I think I've said it more than 4 times or 5 times on this program that is typical of what Nigeria is going through now. That I would rather be taking painkillers than go through all that procedure, forgetting that painkiller will only numb whatever pain he's having now. The cancer is going to kill him anyway. So it's a question of, do you now go for the jugular now and leave, or you want to begin to mollycoddle what is going to kill you eventually by buying some silly time for yourself? Because even the painkiller is not going to buy you time. All you want to make sure is to make sure that it suppresses whatever you're going through now. So these are the issues that is facing this country now. And that is why, for me, I'm so grateful that we have a bloody civilian now who has the balls. I keep saying it every time. He has the balls that former generals don't have, to make sure that he does something that will make sure that will ensure that our economy is set on a straight and narrow. And of course, any woman, I think I made another analogy about a woman who wants to have a child. When you are pregnant, that's something they call trimester. I'm not a woman, but I'm sure that I've had it before because I'm married. So I know what I've had that before. That's something they call trimester. When a woman is about to go to labor and all that, any man who stays with the woman when she's going to labor, you will not want to go next to the woman anymore, because that woman will curse you to high heavens for putting her in that position because of the pain she's going through, which is what Nigeria is going through now. But as soon as she has the baby, and has the baby on her hand, she forget about all of those pains. She'll be the first to share in nation building. There is what is called shared responsibility, and that every Nigerian, must hold a baton to it. For me, when he said that, I was like, I bless God for bringing this man on this program, because this is what people are most Nigerians are shying away from. They want to go to heaven, but they don't want to die. As far as I know, it was only Elijah that was able to do that. Nobody else has been able to do that. So you have to go through something to get to something. And that is what Nigeria is going through now. All we just need, like I've always said, is patience, perseverance, and prayer for the man who has the ball to take us through it. That God should continue to empower him to make sure that he continues in this trajectory. Because whether we like it or not, we have a duty to bequeath to the coming generations a prosperous Nigeria, or else we'll be doomed. And I don't want to start before my maker. And when he asked me, what did you do when Nigeria was going bad? And I will start to stutter. I don't want to do that. So that's why we are doing the little we are doing now, to make sure that we try and I think we've got 3 more hands up now. So let me just call them quickly. We have only 28 minutes to go now, because our special guest generously gave us 1 hour from 4 o'clock. So 5 o'clock on the dot, we will be closing. So let me. I've got 3 people now: Nuruddin Bangura, Jamiu Aziz, and Samuel Adekola. So let me start with Nuruddin Bangura, while Jamiu Aziz should be on the standby. So Nuruddin Bangura, you have. Did I pronounce your surname well? Well, Bangura, you have the. Okay, so please.
Yes. Good evening, sir. Good evening, everyone from here. Thanks for having me here.
Thank you.
Once again, an honor to be part of this great platform, and it's one of a kind that we've been expecting and hoping for over decades to have, and we are happy that you, our elders, are able to see this come true. Thanks, yeah. regarding the presentation, that was a very lovely one. It's amazing and it's beyond even what I thought we are going to have today. But to cut the time short, I have few things I would like to pin out of the presentation, which is very important. One is global renewal hope agenda is not just about politics. It's something that unifies everyone together, not just about Nigeria. It's about global agenda that has to do with the progress of Africa. And when it comes to Africa, the leading in Africa is Nigeria. Because we here out here in diaspora, we have hands that we are trying to bring back home, to project back home, but it's impossible. But with the help of global renewal agenda, we are trying to be open of tomorrow is happening now, and now is the future. So with this platform, I would like to say once again, it's the greatest among all that we know that it's going to make things come true, and it's going to change the future projection of people about how Africa is assumed or how Africa is coming to reality. Now, another thing is within the presentation, there is a section that has to do with where I work personally, which is the aspect of energy. I'm an engineer by profession. I'm into gas. I'm into HVAC, and the renewable energy aspect of it, like biogas, using ways to convert into energy and supply mini grid, is where we have projects that is going to benefit our home, our community, and in Nigeria in general. We have a huge population. We have a huge deposit of waste. We don't use it. And in other countries in Asia, this is trending. This is future. This is what every kid in school are using to practice in their community, in their homes, to showcase what recent technology is about to showcase, to help to ease burden on family and on others by using waste in particular to convert it to energy, to use waste to produce gas, to use the same gas to power electricity, to power community, and which is a future of this generation we have now. That is one of the projects that we have pulled up together, and we're working on it to come also on this similar platform. Hopefully, if we're given the chance to do a presentation that see how we can have it embraced by all, because we aim to educate school children as an excursion. We aim to use it for whole community to put their waste together to make it useful, not just to dirty the environment. So we have also projects in similar few points of what this presentation is about, to support mini-grid, to also give back to the country, to give back to the community, to give back to our nation, to also help the country to go further. Because we in diaspora, we see what is happening outside there. We travel to different continents, different countries. We see what is possible to be done in our homeland. And we are also trying to help to get this also happen. So with the help of this great project, I would say once again, it is the best and it's helpful and it's educative and it's also supportive to our own vision here. And I must say once again, thank you, and I commend it for even my chairman here and my others, brothers that we have platform on to also come on board to encourage and support renewable global agenda. Thank you once again. And these are just my few points I have to add in addition. Thanks.
Thank you so very much for that, for those kind words. Sorry, if you don't mind me asking, where are you calling from, though? Hello? Okay, he seems to have dropped out. Okay, let me just go to the last caller, last participant now. Samuel Adekola, you have your hands up. I'll just ask you to unmute now, please. Unmute yourself. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I've spoken earlier on. I just wanted to say that you make a promise that you're going to open the chat room so people can drop their number so I can be invited. Of course, this is my first time of coming, and it's because of Okolo's invitation. So I'm not likely to come in, have an opportunity for that opportunity. So since you requested that we want to have a number so that we can be invited, I think I tried to visit the chat room, but it's locked.
Okay, I apologize for that. I've just sent a message to my publicity man now. But if you can just take my number down now. Where are you calling from?
In Ondo State, Nigeria.
Ondo State. Okay, yeah. I'm in the UK here. So let me just give you my number. It's a WhatsApp number. If you can give me your, just give me a message to say you spoke to me, and I'll just save you, and I'll be sending you updates. My number is plus
Okay.
plus 44.
All right.
You get that?
Go ahead. Yep.
Plus 44 794
Yeah.
374. I have to think of that now.
Oh my God. Okay.
9001.
900.
So you should have
Okay.
plus 44 794 374 9001.
Yes. Okay. I think I have that.
Okay, yeah. So just send me a
Thank you.
message, and I'll know who you are. Then I will you get. I think there's some kind of technical hitch with the chat room
Okay.
today. So yeah.
No
So
problem. That's
that's
okay.
another way of getting around that. Thank you so very much for your support. We
Uh,
appreciate it. Thanks a lot. God bless you.
welcome.
Okay, I think we have another hand up now. Jamiu Aziz. Jamiu Aziz, can you please unmute yourself now? Jamiu Aziz, are you still there? Hello?
Can you hear me?
Okay, yeah, we can hear you.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you, yeah.
Okay, good evening. Good evening, our chief.
Are you driving? Are you driving?
I'm not driving.
Because yeah, it looks like you're fluctuating. You're fluctuating, that's what I'm asking. If you
Okay,
can just
you
stay,
hear me?
if you can just stay stationary somewhere, talk to us, then we can hear you properly.
Can you?
Hello?
Hello? Hello?
Okay, yes, we can hear you now, yeah.
All right, so
That's Jamie from Ibadan. I'm sure you are from Ibadan, right? Because I know you. You're one of our old members. You are from Ibadan, yeah? Okay. Thank you. Oh, Lord. The network is horrible there. Sorry. Can you move somewhere else, please, to talk to us? Just move somewhere else and talk to us. I really want to. You've spoken before, but I don't mind. I would like to speak. I would like you to speak to us again second time. Yeah. Oh Lord. I hope an investor, maybe we'll make a program about that. An investor can need to go to Nigeria and sort out this our network problem. It is doable. I don't see why we have about 4 or 5 network providers in Nigeria, and yet we have all this kind of problem. You know, we'll try to make a program about that at some point and try and see if we can get some investors to go to Nigeria. I don't mind to facilitate that, just for them to be able to sort out our telephone networking issues for us. Okay, I think Honorable Jamiu Aziz is back on again. Okay, please try and unmute yourself. Just make sure you
okay. Can you hear me better now?
Yes, yeah, we can.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Adebola. Warm regards to the facilitator today, the guest lecturer. That is Mr. Chukwumezie.
Doctor.
Okay, sorry, Dr. Chukwumezie.
Yeah.
PhD. So good evening, sir. Thank you for that. I would like from the admin, if we are going to have a copy of the PowerPoint presentation. We don't really know. We normally have the YouTube this thing. So if it's going to continue, you can just confirm that. And I quickly want to have a comment. I think the lecturer has given us scientific expose, so to say. I just call that word now, because what it is in the real sense of it, naturally, he has told us. However, I think it's like magical in case of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, that within less than 3 years, we are having green light so soon. We're having green light so soon. And I think it's a miracle, and it appears magical to me. It's unfortunate the way our media space is operating. And then some of all these things are not being highlighted. And then they even rather the shenanigans in the political shenanigans in the space too are making frantic effort to just downplay it. It's not that government is not speaking enough. It's not that government is not. I'll give an example, though it can sound political because we are in the political mood now.
Yeah.
That by the time I got the former minister Alikali on transportation, when we put together what he has achieved, as silent as that minister was, as silent as he resigned to go and contest in Gombe or somewhere like that, as silent as he was, the quantum of work delivered on the rail infrastructure under him is competing with 8 years or 7.5 years of Rotimi Amechi with under Buhari. This is not just a flippant statement. Because when we are talking of what they eat at less than 10%, inherit 60% today, and you calculate the mileage of this rail infrastructure, you definitely see that, and you can see the liquidity. And for the first time in the history of Nigeria, at least as far as I can talk about within my age in 50s, right? This is the first time we are having, within the shortest time, all the state of the federation, they are having senior, I'll call it senior infrastructural development in terms of road and several other things. So if the economy has not favored, has not actually turned around the corner, the outlook is not good, how do you think, is it a magic that you are going to be having virtually all the state of the federation, they are having serious with speed of light progress? I think that is like magic to me. So it's not whether they speak enough about it. This is just clear to everybody. Unless you just want to just downplay it for no reason. We are having, at least I always count PDP, that at least I'm a witness, since 1999 to 2015 when they left government, they couldn't give Nigeria or Southwest 1 kilometer from Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, which is a constructed road already. They are just to reconstruct it. But under Bola Ahmed Tinubu, within 18 months or 24 months, we have had more than 100 kilometers of completely paved road on superhighways routes. Coastal Highway and superhighway from Sokoto. I think this is a miracle. What PDP could not do in 16 years, somebody has done in 24 years, in 24 months. I think it's something that is commendable and is noteworthy and is worthy of being highlighted. I think that is the comment I want to say. It's like a magic. We can harmonize ourselves. The reform is for the future. In fact, in case of Bola Tinubu, is turning out to be for the present because the result is coming out so soon. So the pain of price shift, which is natural, is the only thing that we are battling with. Look at energy costs. There's an energy crisis in the global space. We are not having scarcity in Nigeria. You only have price shift. So if I'm still audible, I think I want to leave it there. Everything is silent. Mr. Devolasa, can you hear me?
Yeah,
thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Thank you for
contributing. I have a lot to say about that, but I'll use the floor to our special guest to respond to all the questions that have been, unless he hasn't got any, I'll just use the floor to him now. Thank you so very much. Special guest, you have the floor now, sir.
Okay, sir. So, thank you again. Engineer Nuruddin mentioned something around the renewable energy and how his group has some good things to do in that area. I think that's a very good, and that's the kind of thing we want to hear from our diaspora and how they can support the agenda in different ways. And also, I'm sure that somewhere in the presentation, the leadership could also think about how to leverage diaspora more, because the diaspora is really interested in knowing what, watching what is happening. And one thing I want to also point out there is that by 2050, the population, Nigeria will outnumber the United States. And 1/4 of the world population will be somewhere around here in Africa. And a quarter of that will be in Nigeria. And so Nigeria is going to have a young population. The market is here. The world is going to be coming here. So what we make out of the Renewed Hope agenda is going to determine how strong we will be as a people, both politically, both economically and otherwise, to take care of that teeming population. So something like renewable energy and the investment in that space would be a good thing for us to make happen, because then that will now also help us to take care of that teeming population, not just. And then he didn't say something that this is not just a Nigerian agenda; that is a global agenda. And I think I agree with him that, I mean, if 1/4 of Africa is in Nigeria and more than a quarter of the world is in Africa, then however this the agenda affects Nigeria will reflect on what is happening globally. So let our diaspora engage more, to support what we are doing at home. Now, Jamil talked about the media doing their bit. We are not challenging that or suggesting that the media, the government arm of the media is not doing their work. We're just saying that they could do more to show progress where there is any. We're not saying tell us lies. We're not saying exaggerate. We're saying show, what is happening, where it is happening, in a way that it communicates to the common people. Because when people see progress being made, hope comes alive. Their hope is renewed. If they can anticipate positive impact, they will be patient. They will. It's when people can going through some difficulties and they don't see hope in the horizon, then some of them sell their things and run away to the UK or to Australia. Some of them give up on hope. And once you give up on hope, you are defeated already. And so the place of strategic communication with policy implementation is key. Is key. And so I think that is what the point we are making there. And I would like Jamil to understand, to look at it from that perspective. Otherwise, I think those are the few things I wanted to comment about. And I'm happy to take more questions. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so very much. I think regarding the issue of diaspora involvement in Nigeria, from my experience, most 90% of Nigerians in diaspora would like to be involved in what is going on in Nigeria. But the point, the crux of the matter is Nigeria ready for diaspora involvement? That's the key. I won't talk much on that. That's a topic for another day that we'll bring on this program and we'll talk about. Nigerians diaspora are ready to be part of what is going on at home. But the question is Nigeria ready for it? I'll give you a pointer. The diaspora voting advocacy that we financed from here privately, and it goes to the third reading at the National Assembly before some, I don't want to talk too much, some senators and some House of Reps members voted down on the third, forgetting that if we in diaspora have the right to vote, it will benefit them more than it is now. Because I've always been saying it, that when people talk about one man, one vote, it is only applicable in Nigeria. Now, every single Nigerian that you see in diaspora, that's one man, one vote it's not applicable to us. Because me personally now, I can tell you I have more than 50 people back at home who listens to what I say. They'll go to where I tell them to go for obvious reasons that I don't want to talk about. So one man, one vote is not applicable to me. So which means if they give us that right to vote in Nigeria, they will be the beneficiary because I can just, like I'm supporting the president now, I can just say to every single 50 people following me, now Tinubu will not go vote for because they know they dare not go against what I've just said. I won't talk too much about that. It's like I said, it's a program for another day. We'll bring it on, and I'm sure most Nigerians in diaspora will flood us with questions. So watch this space. I think we have another name up now, which will probably be the last participant that we're allowed to speak because we want even though he's giving us the grace for another 1 hour, I don't want to go beyond that. So I've got Professor Ugoji Eze Esquire. I believe that's a lawyer. Professor Ugoji Eze, you have the floor now, sir. Please, I've asked you to unmute, so please unmute yourself.
Thank you so much, sir. I'd like to first and foremost say a huge thank you to Dr. Okolo for his lengthy presentation, which I listened from beginning to end. I would just like to say a few comments. And basically, I believe that this noble presentation should focus mainly from what I'll call from policy to practice and developing sustainable leadership. There's a need to address the critical imperative of human capacity building that will bring public policy frameworks within actionable strategies for sustainable leadership within the Nigerian context. Now, against the backdrop of global discussions on sustainable development goals from the United Nations and also environmental stewardship, there's a need to explore how local leadership in the Nigerian context can effectively contribute to and indeed align with these global agendas. There's a need to focus on the 4 points. Firstly, capacity building, providing ideas and indeed tools for enhancing leadership capacity to drive sustainable development initiatives effectively. Secondly, the importance of policy implementation, the challenges which do exist, namely identifying the barriers and indeed the solutions in translating global policy frameworks into actionable programs at the Nigerian level and also the Renewed Hope level. And also what we call sustainable leadership practices, showcasing successful initiatives, which I'm sure there are successful initiatives and innovations that demonstrate effective leadership in sustainability. And finally, the need for collaborative partnerships, exploring the role of partnerships and indeed collaboration among stakeholders in achieving sustainable development outcomes. And as you said, we could take the discussion another time of the role of Nigerians in the diaspora. I thank you so much, sir.
God bless you, ma'am. I think I will yield the floor now to our special guest now to give us a roundup on your take on this event. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you again for giving me the opportunity to respond. Maybe I would have wanted to respond from yours first. You're talking about, is Nigeria ready for the diaspora? Yeah, and you talked about, can you hear me?
Yes, you can add that to it, okay. Yeah.
Okay. And you talked about voting. When I talked about the diaspora, I didn't even think about that part. And that part, as valid as it is, I was thinking that as it in Nigeria now, this is my 2 years in Nigeria. And what I have, if my experience is anything to go by, I can tell you that Nigeria is not ready for the diaspora, anyhow you look at it. And I think we are missing something critical from that perspective. Yes. There is no provision to encourage diaspora to come back
Yeah.
and to give back. There is
Yeah.
no adequate cushioning. There is no platform. There is no program of receiving and reintegrating and supporting the diaspora with all their ideas, their experience, their investment, whatever they are bringing on board, to integrate it in a way that is strong enough to attract more of us. Yeah. And so when we have, I will be glad to be around when we're going to have this conversation, because it's going to be an interesting conversation. Nigeria needs to, and for the renewed hope agenda to actually have its full impact, there is a need for us to reframe the involvement of the diaspora and then leverage the wealth that they are bringing in diverse ways. Now, the professor spoke like a professor. I would like to collaborate with her beyond here, but I do sincerely agree that that leadership and leadership development is part of what we have been trying to advocate in the past 2 years. And she talked about capacity building, sustainable development, environmental stewardship, those kind of things. Those are part of the stuff I have been trying to advocate within these past 2 years. A lot of people still look at me and they say, how come a pharmacist when he's talking leadership, how pharmacist is doing? Because our thinking is that pharmacists should be giving drugs, take 1 3 times a day. But now they're beginning to see that the pharmacist went all the way to do a PhD in leadership studies, and he's talking about capacity building, and building systems, leadership development, formulating theories, and all of those kind of things. So my point is, with the collaboration that she suggests, and because she talked about collaborative partnerships, and bringing in our local indigenous knowledge into the experiences that we already have from overseas. There's nothing there's no solution that will elude us. Because sometimes when we hire foreign consultants and foreign people, they don't have any clue about the nuances of our system and how it operates. Now, when you have our own people, like the professor, involved in the Nigerian context in some ways, or give back in some ways in the leadership development or this kind of collaborative partnerships, you will see that the result will be great. So yeah, I agree with her. Beyond here, I would like to see how continue that conversation on how we can all join hands to make the renewed hope a reality in Nigeria. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, sir, for taking the time out to be with us for 3 solid hours. We've gone even beyond that by 1 minute now, which again says a lot about your personality. And for me, I think, well, I remain grateful to you and to your family too for releasing you to be with us for this long, because I know how hard it is for us, for me and my team, to be able to get any of our leaders to come and sit with us for 2 hours, and for you to stay with us for 3 hours. And not just that, you broke the record of being the first special guest that will regale us for 2 hours solid with your presentation. I think that says a lot. And when you were going about it, I was thinking, okay, who's this guy again? And I saw, oh, he's a scholar. And I'm like, okay, that figures. Because it takes a scholar to be able to grasp everybody's attention for 2 hours and not a single dull moment. And I mean that with every fiber of my being. Not a single dull moment for those 2 hours. For me, that says a lot. So for that, we remain eternally grateful to you. Thank you so very much for doing that. And from the feelers I'm getting now, we might call you again, because a couple of people have sent me private messages now that they want you back again. So I'm gonna call you, and I'm sure when we do, you'll oblige us again. Thank you so very much. So I don't know, maybe you have some last minute remarks for us as the team behind this, and for Nigerians across the world, and for the government in place at the moment now. So I will use the floor for you for a couple of minutes, sir. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much again for inviting me to your platform. It's a privilege and an honor I do not take for granted. I look forward to it, and because for me, is Nigeria o'clock, it's Africa o'clock, So whatever and however we should be able to support the system as technocrats, as experienced people, as people who have seen how things work around the world. It should be an honor and a privilege. So on the topic of our discussion, the promise from promise to performance, I'm sure that the government is doing all their best to make sure that they deliver on that promise, and we're already beginning to see from all the contributions that some impact, some effects are already being seen, trickling in here and there. But I haven't taken time to study the agenda. I am convinced that when it is institutionalized in a way that survives even subsequent administrations, there's no reason why the New Hope agenda should just be a one regime kind of agenda. It is something that should be branded like Nigeria Vision 2040 or Nigerian Vision 2050, something. And then we set different milestones that must be achieved by certain times. And regardless of who is in office, they continue on that, so that way we have some continuity. We leverage some institutional memory, and we'll be able to advance, sustain the gains of the reform. Again, remember that it took many years. The distortions took many years. And so when the surgical fixing, which is the reform, will not bring all the results in 1 day or 1 year. It will take a little bit of time. And as time goes on, what is going to happen is when you look at, if you look at that theory that I was trying to use to explain the delayed dividend theory, what happens is that you have pain the first time the reform is started, and the gains there are probably no gains. But as time passes, you see that the pain will be going down and the gains will be going up, and there is no telling how up this gain will be. Even though people may have a little bit of lag time in between when the gain is not being properly appreciated, I'm sure that over time, if government sequences it properly and cushions the pain a little bit more, by the time the gains catch up, we should all be happy for the courage to make it happen. With that, I think we come to the end of it. My contacts are still available. If anybody has any questions or want to send messages, email questions, or however they want to reach out to me through you, with all pleasure. It's a conversation I'm happy to have all day, every day, everything. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so very much. And all I can just say is God bless you and your household, because today you've given us 3 solid quality time to Nigerians, both at home and in diaspora. And I think every single one of us are blessed with the wealth of knowledge that you've shared with us. And I believe that God will continue to endow you with more wisdom, and will continue to endow you with more knowledge. And thank you so very much, and our regards to your family. Thank you. God bless you. And I'm just going to close with what's your parting word, because this was your exact passing word, which caught my heart. You said Nigeria is not failing because it reformed. It is struggling. Those were the operative words: failing and struggling. Nigeria is not failing because it reformed, but it is struggling because it reformed faster than its system could absorb. And I remember during your presentation, you spoke about the need for strong institutions, which for me is the panacea for that passing word. If we can only strengthen our institutions, then this reform we're talking about, yeah, we can be absorbed easily with less hardship to our people. Again, at the beginning, you made a profound statement where you said reform produce destructions first and benefit later. And I will add to it that reform is a marathon. Only those with stamina endures. That's what I'm going to close with. So, and I hope that resonates with Nigerians, both at home and in diaspora, because Nigeria is our country. We have to do whatever it takes to make sure that that country survives. That's one, and that the country becomes one of the what takes its rightful place in the committee of nations. That is my prayer, and I believe that will be the prayer of every Nigerian. So for that, I say thank you so very much, everybody, for all our participants who are always, every time we call upon you, you come every week without fail. Thank you so very much, and God bless you. And to our special guest, Dr. Chukwumezie Okolo, and your family, I say thank you so very much. And on behalf of the team, we appreciate you for spending 3 solid hours and 10 minutes with us. Like I said, we will be knocking on your door again, because I've got a couple of requests to bring you back, because people enjoy your 2 hours and so much that they want you back. So thank you so very much, and God bless you. And on this note now, we will be drawing the curtain, but not before I call on the matron of the house to give us her closing remarks, and that is Hajia Rekia Bello Abaka. You have the floor now, ma'am.
Thank you, our Chief Host, Ambassador J.K. Ademola. Ladies and gentlemen, we've come to another very exciting episode. Thank you to our special guest, Dr. Okolo, for your very elaborate and impressive presentation. To our participants all over the world, thank you as always. Join us again next week for another exciting event. On behalf of the Renewed Hope Global Virtual Town Hall Conference team, have a great weekend. God bless Nigeria.
Thank you, everybody. God bless you all. Thank you.